In a mansion where marble floors shine brighter than human hearts, kindness dies quietly behind locked doors. A young orphan is called charity girl and treated like dirt, while an old maid is mocked, humiliated, and laughed at for being weak. In this house, power speaks loudly. Cruelty hides behind smiles, and the poor are invisible. But what no one knows is this: that fragile old woman holding a mop is not who she seems. And the girl everyone despises carries a heart strong enough to shake the future of the richest man in town. One act of kindness, one moment of courage, one truth hidden in plain sight. Stay with this story until the end, because what begins with humiliation will end with justice, and what is despised today will be crowned tomorrow. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. And if stories of justice, kindness, and destiny move you, don't forget to subscribe and join our family. The estate sat on the quiet edge of the city, where the road curved gently away from the noise of the market and into a world of trimmed hedges, white walls, and gates that slid open without sound. People spoke of the Lawson household with admiration. They called it a home of values, a family blessed by God, a symbol of success in modern Africa. From the outside, it looked flawless. From the inside, it was something else entirely. On a Monday morning, an old woman arrived at the gate carrying a small bucket and a worn mop. Her wrapper was faded from too many washes, her slippers thin and tired. A scarf hid most of her hair, and her back was slightly bent, not from weakness, but from intention. She wanted to look small. She wanted to be overlooked. Her name, according to the paper she handed to the guard, was Mama Kemi. The head housekeeper scanned her from head to toe with a sharp, impatient eye. "You are the new cleaner?" she asked. "Yes, Ma," the old woman replied softly. "I work quietly. I don't complain." "That is good," the housekeeper said. "We don't like noise here. Follow me." Mama Kemi stepped into the compound, and the gates closed behind her with a heavy finality. To anyone watching, she was just another poor woman grateful for work. But inside her chest, her heart beat with a different purpose. Mama Kemi was not poor. She was not weak. And she was not here by accident. She was the mother of one of the wealthiest young men in the country, a woman whose name carried weight in boardrooms and charity halls. She had built businesses with her late husband from nothing, survived betrayal, and learned one painful truth. Over the years, money reveals people, but it does not make them good. Her son was of age to marry. Women surrounded him everywhere he went. Beautiful, educated, polished women who smiled perfectly and spoke the right words. But Mama Kemi had seen too many homes destroyed by wives who loved wealth more than character. She refused to hand her son's future to appearances. So she chose a different path. She chose to test hearts where no one performs. The Lawson family had been recommended to her by many people. Good people, they said. Respectable, God-fearing. Their daughters were praised at events, always well-dressed, always smiling beside their father. One of them, people whispered, would surely become the perfect wife for her son. Mama Kemi smiled when she heard those words. Praise, she knew, was cheap. She wanted to see how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. Inside the house, the air smelled of expensive perfume and polish. Shoes lined neatly near the staircase. Family portraits hung on the walls, showing perfect smiles frozen in time. Mama Kemi followed the housekeeper down a long corridor toward the staff quarters, a narrow space tucked behind the main building. "This is where you'll sleep," the housekeeper said, pointing to a small room with a thin mattress and one small window. "You wake up before 6. You clean, you keep quiet, and you don't interfere with family matters." "Yes, Ma," Mama Kemi answered. As the housekeeper walked away, Mama Kemi placed her bucket gently on the floor and sat on the edge of the mattress. The room was plain, but she had slept in worse places during her early years. She closed her eyes briefly and whispered a prayer, asking for strength, patience, and clarity. Then she stood up and went to work. The first thing she noticed was the way orders were given not with respect, but with snapping fingers and sharp tones. One of the daughters passed by without looking at her, dropping a handbag on a chair and walking away as if Mama Kemi were part of the furniture. Another complained loudly about dust that had already been wiped. Mama Kemi bowed her head each time and replied with a quiet "Yes, Ma." She watched. She listened. She remembered. By midday, she noticed someone else. Sarah. Sarah was different from the others in ways that did not announce themselves loudly. She moved gently through the house, never dragging her feet, never raising her voice. When she carried plates back to the kitchen, she did so even when no one was watching. When she passed the gardeners, she greeted them by name. When Mama Kemi struggled with a heavy bucket, Sarah stepped forward without being asked. "Let me help you, Grandma," she said softly, lifting the handle from Mama Kemi's hands. Mama Kemi looked at her face closely for the first time. Sarah's beauty was not the kind that demanded attention. It was quiet, like moonlight reflected on water. There was tiredness in her eyes, but also warmth. "Thank you, my daughter," Mama Kemi replied. "We all live here," Sarah said with a small smile, "so we should all help." Later that afternoon, Mama Kemi learned Sarah's place in the family. "She is not really one of us," one of the daughters said casually to another, not bothering to lower her voice. "Daddy brought her from some charity thing years ago, for publicity." "Yes," another laughed. "Charity girl. She should remember her place." Sarah heard the words. Mama Kemi saw her pause for half a second, just long enough for the insult to land, then continue walking as if nothing had happened. No tears, no protest, just silence. That silence spoke loudly. As evening fell and the generator hummed to life, Mama Kemi lay on her thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. From somewhere inside the main house, laughter floated down the corridor, sharp and careless. She thought of her son, unaware that his mother was sleeping behind another man's kitchen, pretending to be invisible. She pressed her hand to her chest. This was not going to be easy. To be mocked and ignored when you are powerful is one thing. To be treated as worthless when you are not is another. But Mama Kemi reminded herself why she was here. She was here to find the truth, and the truth she already sensed was not wearing fine clothes. Morning arrived quietly in the Lawson mansion, announced not by birdsong but by the soft shuffle of staff moving into position before the family woke. Mama Kemi was already on her feet, tying her faded wrapper tighter around her waist and filling her bucket with fresh water. She moved slowly, deliberately careful not to draw attention. In this house, being unseen was a kind of safety. By the time the sun crept through the tall windows, the daughters of the house began to appear one by one, each, carrying herself like a queen in her own kingdom. The eldest, whom everyone called Nadia, descended the staircase first. She walked with confidence, sharpened into arrogance, her chin lifted, her voice always ready to command. Nadia believed the house belonged to her not because her name was on any document, but because everyone bent when she spoke. Her words were polished, her insults subtle, delivered with a smile that made them sound reasonable. Behind her came Amara, the second daughter phone already in her hand. Amara lived for the camera. She posted pictures feeding stray animals, hugging children at charity events, and smiling beside her father at public functions. Online, people adored her. Offline, she kicked the same stray animals away once the camera was gone. Mama Kemi watched her once stroke a cat gently while filming, then shove it aside with her foot the moment the screen went dark. The third daughter, Zainab, moved differently. She spoke less but watched more. She stored people's mistakes like weapons, saving them for the right moment. She remembered who spilled what, who spoke out of turn, who looked at her wrongly. Zainab did not shout. She waited. And then there was the youngest, Ifunanya. Barely grown sharp-tongued and reckless, she treated cruelty like entertainment. She laughed loudest when someone cried. Her phone was always recording, always ready to capture humiliation and turn it into amusement for her friends. 4 daughters, 4 different faces of the same poison. They greeted one another warmly in public spaces, laughing, touching arms, performing sisterhood as if it were a rehearsed play. But Mama Kemi noticed how quickly their smiles faded when servants passed, how commands replaced greetings, how respect ended the moment power was assured. And then there was Sarah. Sarah usually appeared last, slipping quietly into the room as if hoping not to disturb the air. She dressed simply, always neat, never flashy. While the others waited to be served, Sarah often carried her own plate to the kitchen. While the daughters complained about dust, Sarah picked up a cloth and wiped it without being asked. Mama Kemi noticed the way Sarah folded clothes with care, aligning edges precisely, as if order was something she created for herself in a life that offered little of it. She noticed how Sarah greeted her every morning, not with pity, but with genuine warmth. "Good morning," Grandma Sarah would say, not old woman, not maid, grandma. The contrast between Sarah and the others was not loud. It was quiet and constant, like water wearing down stone. That morning, Mama Kemi was mopping the hallway when Ifunanya rushed past, deliberately knocking over the bucket. Soapy water spread across the polished floor. "Ah," Ifunanya exclaimed loudly. "Can't you see where you're putting things?" Mama Kemi bent slowly her knees, protesting as she reached for the mop. "I'm sorry, my child," she said, though she knew the fault was not hers. Before she could finish, Nadia appeared, drawn by the sound. "What is this mess?" she snapped. "Can you people ever do anything right?" Sarah stepped forward instinctively. "I was helping her move the bucket," she said quickly. "It was my mistake." Mama Kemi looked up sharply, surprised. Sarah had no reason to protect her. Nadia's eyes narrowed. Helping, she scoffed. "You help too much. You are not staff, but you behave like one." Amara leaned against the railing phone, tilted slightly as if ready to record. "Leave her," she said lightly. "It's what she knows. Charity habits die hard." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Sarah lowered her gaze. She did not argue. She picked up a cloth and knelt beside Mama Kemi, helping her soak up the water in silence. Mama Kemi felt something tighten in her chest. Later in the kitchen, when no one was watching, Sarah slid a plate toward Mama Kemi. Rice stew and a small piece of fish rested on it. "You've been working since morning," Sarah whispered. "Please eat." Mama Kemi studied her face. "And you? I ate last night," Sarah replied quickly, her smile a little too practiced. Mama Kemi broke the fish in half and pushed part back. "Then eat with me." They sat side by side, sharing the meal quietly. It was the kind of silence shared by people who understand hunger not just of the stomach but of kindness. As they ate, the cook passed by and clicked her tongue. "Don't sit too long," she warned Sarah. "Your sisters are looking for you." Sarah's hands paused for a moment. "They are not my sisters," she said softly. That night, Mama Kemi lay awake listening to the house settle. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed. Laughter followed, sharp and careless. In another room, someone cried quietly, trying not to be heard. Mama Kemi turned onto her side and stared at the wall. This house wore kindness like jewelry, beautiful, expensive and fake. But beneath it she saw hunger for power, fear of losing status, and cruelty passed down like inheritance. And yet, within that same house there was Sarah, a girl with no blood, ties, no protection, no wealth, yet rich in something the others lacked. Mama Kemi closed her eyes and whispered another prayer. "Let me see clearly," she asked, "and give me the strength to endure what I must." Because she knew now with quiet certainty that the test had truly begun. By the 4th day, the rhythm of the house had settled into something Mama Kemi could predict. Orders came sharply in the mornings. Laughter followed cruelty. Silence was demanded from those without power. and kindness, when shown by the wrong person, was treated like rebellion. That morning, the sun had barely risen when Nadia's voice echoed through the hallway. "Why is this place still dusty?" she snapped, stepping carefully around a corner she had deliberately avoided the night before. "Do we pay people to sleep here?" Mama Kemi lowered her head and lifted her mop again. Her arms ached and her knees felt stiff, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that arguing with arrogance was like shouting at the wind. As she worked, Zainab stood nearby pretending to scroll through her phone while watching every movement. Ifunanya hovered on the staircase, boredom etched across her young face. Suddenly, with a casual flick of her foot, she nudged a small stool directly into Mama Kemi's path. The old woman's foot caught and she stumbled. The bucket tipped slightly, spilling water across the floor. There, Ifunanya shouted triumphantly, "See what she's done." Nadia appeared instantly, as if she had been waiting. "Unbelievable," she said coldly. "You people are useless. Clean that up before my guests arrive." Mama Kemi bent down slowly, her back protesting. Before she could speak, Sarah stepped forward. "It was my fault," Sarah said calmly. "I was moving things earlier. I must have left the stool there." Mama Kemi froze. She turned her head and looked at Sarah, confusion flickering across her face. Sarah met her eyes briefly and gave the smallest shake of her head as if to say, "Let it go." Nadia laughed a short, humorless sound. "Always the savior," she said. "You like taking blame so much, maybe you enjoy suffering." Amara raised her phone slightly. "Say that again," she murmured, smiling. "It'll sound good online." Sarah lowered her eyes. "I just don't want trouble." Zainab finally spoke. "Trouble follows people who forget their place." Those words landed heavier than any slap. Mama Kemi watched Sarah kneel on the cold floor, soaking up water that was not her mistake. She noticed how Sarah's hands trembled, not from fear, but from holding back something deeper. Pain, anger, dignity under attack. Yet Sarah did not cry. She finished cleaning, stood up quietly, and returned the cloth to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. But Mama Kemi knew something had happened. Later that afternoon, as the heat pressed down on the compound, Sarah was sent to carry a basket of laundry from the upper floor to the back room. The basket was heavy, filled with clothes that could have been moved in smaller loads. Nadia watched her struggle and said nothing. Mama Kemi followed a few steps behind, ready to help if needed. Halfway down the stairs, Sarah's foot slipped slightly. The basket tilted and a few clothes spilled onto the floor. "If you ruin any of those dresses," Amara said lazily, "you'll pay for them. I don't care how." Sarah bent quickly, gathering the clothes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mama Kemi reached for the basket to steady it. "Let me help." "No," Nadia snapped. "She made the mess. She will carry it alone." Mama Kemi withdrew her hand. In that moment, she understood something painful. Sarah was not just being mistreated. She was being tested again and again to see how much humiliation she would accept before breaking, and Sarah was choosing every time to remain kind. That evening, Mama Kemi found Sarah alone in the kitchen, scrubbing pots long after the others had left. "You should rest," Mama Kemi said gently. Sarah smiled without looking up. "Rest comes when work is done." Mama Kemi leaned against the counter. "Why do you always protect people who hurt you?" Sarah paused. The sponge stilled in her hand. "I don't protect them," she said quietly. "I protect myself. If I become like them, then they win." The words sank deep. Mama Kemi felt tears threaten her eyes, but she blinked them away. This girl was not weak. She was choosing strength the hardest way possible. The next test came sooner than expected. The following morning, Ifunanya burst into the living room shouting, "My bracelet is missing." She held up her empty wrist dramatically, eyes wide with practiced panic. It was right here last night. Amara stood immediately. That's not a small thing. That bracelet is expensive. Zainab's gaze shifted slowly toward Sarah, who stood near the doorway holding a tray. Things don't disappear on their own, she said. The implication was clear. The housekeeper gathered the staff in the living room. Everyone will be searched, she announced. No exceptions. Mama Kemi felt Sarah tense beside her. When they reached Sarah's corner of the shared room, Nadia took over personally. She opened boxes, pulled out folded clothes, and sighed loudly, as if disappointed but unsurprised. Then Ifunanya let out a scream. Here it is. She lifted Sarah's small plastic bucket, the one Sarah used to fetch water for washing, and tipped it slightly. Sitting neatly on top of a folded wrapper was the missing bracelet, gleaming. The room went silent. Sarah stared at it, shock draining the color from her face. I didn't, she began. Amara sighed theatrically. After everything Daddy did for you. Zainab shook her head. Some people never change. Mama Kemi stepped forward. That bracelet. Stay out of this, Nadia snapped. This is family business. Sarah's voice trembled, but she stood straight. I didn't take it, I swear. Before anyone could respond, a calm voice spoke from the doorway. Interesting, it said. All heads turned. The young man who had arrived earlier to speak with Mr. Lawson stood there holding a file under his arm. His eyes moved from the bracelet to Sarah's face, then to the bucket. He walked closer and picked up the bracelet using a handkerchief. No watermarks, he said thoughtfully. No soap residue. He looked at the bucket. But this bucket is wet. You fetched water recently, didn't you? Yes, Sarah replied softly. I washed clothes this morning. If the bracelet had been there for long, he continued, it wouldn't be dry. No one spoke. He turned to Ifunanya. Who found it? She did. Zainab answered quickly, pointing. And where was she before he asked? Nadia bristled. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting nothing. He said evenly. I'm observing. In business, false evidence is common. This looks arranged. Mr. Lawson entered the room just then, confusion on his face. After a brief explanation, he rubbed his temples. This is enough, he said finally. Return the bracelet, and all of you leave her alone. The sisters exchanged looks of frustration. They had failed. As everyone dispersed, Mama Kemi caught Sarah's eye. Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly, the strength finally costing her something. Mama Kemi reached into her pocket that night and wrote one line in her small notebook. She chooses goodness even when it hurts. And with that, Sarah moved one step closer to a destiny she could not yet imagine. The house did not apologize after the accusation failed. It simply moved on the way powerful places often do, as if silence could erase wrongdoing. The sisters returned to their routines, their laughter a little tighter, their eyes sharper whenever Sarah passed. They had lost one battle, but pride does not retreat easily. For Sarah, the days grew heavier. She moved through the house like a shadow, careful with every step, every word. She spoke less now, not because she had lost her voice, but because she had learned that silence was the safest language in a house where truth was inconvenient. Still, she worked. Still, she helped. Still, she greeted people with kindness that felt increasingly lonely. Mama Kemi watched her closely. She noticed the change in Sarah's shoulders, how they curved inward just a little more each day. She noticed how Sarah flinched when someone called her name too loudly. And she noticed something else, something that revealed the depth of Sarah's character more than any grand gesture ever could. It was hunger. Not the dramatic kind that makes people faint or beg, but the quiet kind that settles into the body when you choose others before yourself again and again. One afternoon, the heat wrapped itself around the compound like a heavy cloth. The air conditioner in the main house hummed steadily, but the staff area remained warm and close. Mama Kemi had been scrubbing the back corridor for hours, her fingers stiff and sore. When she finally sat down to rest, her stomach tightened painfully. She had eaten very little since arriving, not because she lacked food, but because she had watched Sarah quietly reduce her own portions day after day, always finding a reason to give more to someone else. That day when the kitchen emptied and the cook stepped out to answer a phone call, Sarah appeared beside Mama Kemi holding a plate wrapped in cloth. "Grandma," she whispered, glancing toward the door. "Please." She placed the plate gently on Mama Kemi's lap and began to step away before any refusal could come. Mama Kemi lifted the cloth. Rice, stew, and a small piece of fish carefully placed on top like something precious. Mama Kemi's throat tightened. "Sarah," she said softly, "where is your own food?" Sarah smiled quickly. Too quickly. "I ate already." Mama Kemi had lived long enough to recognize a lie told out of kindness. She picked up the fish, broke it cleanly in half, and placed one piece back onto the plate. Then she pushed the plate toward Sarah. "Sit," she said gently. "Let us eat together." Sarah hesitated. Someone might come. "Let them," Mama Kemi replied. They sat on the floor beside the counterbacks against the cool cabinet, knees drawn close. They ate, slowly sharing the food evenly, neither rushing, neither hoarding. It was not just a meal, it was an understanding. As they ate, Mama Kemi watched Sarah from the corner of her eye. The girl chewed carefully as if afraid of finishing too fast. She did not take more than her share. She did not look around anxiously. She simply ate and for a brief moment relaxed. "Why do you do this?" Mama Kemi asked quietly. Sarah looked confused. "Do what Give Mama Kemi said. Even when you have little, even when it costs you." Sarah swallowed and stared at the floor. For a moment, Mama Kemi thought she would not answer. "When I was younger," Sarah began slowly, "I learned something. Hunger makes people cruel. It makes them forget who they are. I promised myself that no matter how little I had, I would not let hunger turn me into someone I didn't recognize." Mama Kemi felt the weight of those words settle into her bones. Before she could respond, footsteps approached. The cook returned, clicking her tongue in irritation when she saw them sitting. "Sarah," she snapped, "why are you always here? Your sisters are looking for you." Sarah stood quickly. "They are not my sisters," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The cook rolled her eyes and walked away. Mama Kemi watched Sarah leave her plate, now empty her back straight despite the insult. Something inside Mama Kemi shifted, solidifying into certainty. That night the generator failed again. The house plunged into darkness, broken only by phone lights and distant laughter. Voices echoed down the corridor, complaints about the heat, about inconvenience, about discomfort that would last only a few minutes. Mama Kemi moved carefully through the dark with a small torch, making her way towards the storage room. As she turned a corner, she nearly collided with Sarah, who was carrying a bowl of soaked grains. Grandma Sarah whispered urgently, "Here!" She pushed the bowl into Mama Kemi's hands. "I already ate," Sarah added quickly before Mama Kemi could ask. Mama Kemi almost laughed at the familiar lie. They sat together on the floor, against the wall, sharing the bowl in the dim light. The hallway smelled faintly of soap and warm concrete. Somewhere nearby, the sisters' voices drifted through the dark. "Who took my charger?" Ifunanya shouted. "I will deal with whoever it is." "It must be her." Amara laughed softly. "She likes free things." Sarah stiffened. "I didn't take anything," she said quietly, though no one could see her. Footsteps approached. A phone light flicked on, illuminating the scene: Sarah and Mama Kemi sitting close, sharing food like equals. Nadia's voice cut through the darkness. "What is this?" Sarah stood immediately, holding the bowl steady. "We were just eating." "You share food with staff now," Nadia scoffed. Is that how you were raised?" "I was raised to share, Sarah," replied her voice calm but firm. Amara reached for the bowl. "Give me that." The bowl slipped grains scattering across the floor and splashing onto Mama Kemi's wrapper. Before anyone could laugh, a quiet voice spoke from behind them. "Enough." The beam of a phone light turned, revealing the young man who had been visiting the house frequently. He stood there, his expression unreadable. His eyes moved first to Mama Kemi, wet and shaking slightly, then to Sarah, who instinctively knelt to pick up the spilled grains. He took off his jacket and draped it gently over Mama Kemi's shoulders. "Are you hurt, Mama?" he asked. "I'm fine." Mama Kemi replied, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. Nadia forced a smile. "It was just an accident." "Then apologize," the young man said calmly. To her, Amara asked, incredulous. "To a human being," he replied. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Eventually, mumbled apologies fell from reluctant lips. The lights came back on moments later, harsh and revealing. That night, alone in her small room, Mama Kemi opened her notebook again. She wrote slowly, carefully, as if carving truth into stone. Sarah gives before she takes. She protects the weak even when she is weak herself. This house confuses kindness for foolishness. She closed the notebook and rested it against her chest. Her decision was forming not as a sudden realization, but as something inevitable. And though Sarah did not know it yet, the simple act of sharing a meal had tipped the scales of destiny. The announcement came just after breakfast, carried through the house with the urgency of exciting news and the tension of competition. "Sir is arriving today," the head housekeeper declared. "Everything must be perfect." Those words changed the air immediately. Mama Kemi felt it before she understood it, the sudden tightening, the way footsteps became faster voices, higher laughter, sharper. The Lawson daughters reacted like soldiers hearing the trumpet of battle. Doors slammed, wardrobes opened. Dresses were pulled out, discarded, reconsidered. Perfume floated heavily through the hallways, thick enough to choke sincerity. Nadia took charge instantly. "Clean the living room again," she ordered. "And the staircase, and the guest bathroom. I don't want a single mark anywhere." Amara adjusted the angle of mirrors, already testing camera filters on her phone. "This is important," she murmured more to herself than anyone else. Zainab stood quietly near the window, watching the driveway with calculating eyes. Ifunanya bounced with excitement. "Is he really that rich?" she asked. "They say he owns half the city." Mama Kemi kept her head down and continued wiping the banister, her hands steady, despite the sudden pounding in her chest. She knew exactly who was coming. Her son. He had returned from a long business trip abroad, summoned for final discussions with Mr. Lawson about a major partnership. He had called her the night before, tired but cheerful, unaware that his mother was living quietly behind another man's kitchen. "Mommy, I'll see you soon," he had said. Mama Kemi had smiled into the phone, her voice calm. "Go well, my son." Now she would see him not as his mother, but as a stranger. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the compound. Gates slid open. Security straightened their backs. A sleek car rolled in and stopped with quiet authority. The driver stepped out first, opening the back door. The young man who emerged did not rush. He stood tall, dressed simply in a well-fitted traditional outfit, nothing flashy, nothing excessive. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who did not need to prove his worth. His eyes were calm, observant, taking in details others ignored. "Welcome, sir," the guard said, almost in unison. "Thank you," he replied. His voice was steady, warm but firm. "Is Mr. Lawson available?" "Yes, sir, waiting in the study." The daughters appeared immediately. Nadia glided forward first, her smile practiced. "You must be tired from your journey," she said sweetly. "Let me get you something." "Water is fine," he replied politely. Amara was already there with a tray of juice. Freshly pressed, she added quickly. "Water is fine," he repeated with a small smile. From the side entrance, Mama Kemi approached, carrying a wooden tray with a jug of water and a glass. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the strange weight of serving her own child in a house where she was invisible. She poured the water carefully and held it out, her eyes lowered. "Thank you," he said, automatically taking the glass. Then he looked up. For a brief second, something flickered across his face, a sense of familiarity without recognition. He hesitated, studying her features as if searching for something just out of reach. Mama Kemi's heart clenched. He did not recognize her. Not with the scarf, not with the bent posture, not with the quiet voice. The disguise held. "Shall we begin?" he said, turning toward the study. As he passed through the hallway, Sarah descended the stairs carrying folded towels. She moved carefully, trying to avoid attention. But one towel slipped from her arms and fell softly onto the floor. She froze. He turned at the sound. Their eyes met. It was not dramatic. There was no sudden gasp, no music swelling in the air. It was something quieter, deeper, like recognition without memory, like truth brushing against truth. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, bending to pick up the towel. "It's all right," he said gently. His gaze lingered just a moment longer than politeness required. He noticed how she held the towels against her chest, not possessively but protectively, as if shielding something fragile inside herself. Amara stepped quickly between them. "Sir Daddy is waiting," she said brightly. "Yes," he replied, but his eyes followed Sarah as she walked away. In the study, the meeting began. Numbers appeared on screens. Contracts were discussed. Mr. Lawson spoke enthusiastically about growth expansion influence. The young man listened carefully, asking precise questions, noting inconsistencies, measuring ambition against integrity. Outside the door, Mama Kemi leaned against the wall, her breath slow and controlled. She had just watched her son walk past her without knowing her face. It hurt more than she had expected. But she reminded herself why she was here. After the meeting ended, the daughters circled again, offering invitations, laughter, promises of charity events and social gatherings. He nodded politely, committing to nothing. As he stepped into the hallway, he saw Mama Kemi again, this time kneeling, picking crumbs off the carpet by hand because no vacuum had been brought. Beside her knelt Sarah, helping without a word. Two women on their knees, one with wealth hidden under rags, one with dignity hidden under neglect. Something settled quietly inside him. That evening, the mansion buzzed with excitement. Whispers followed him wherever he went. The daughters watched Sarah more closely now, irritation tightening their smiles. And Sarah felt it. She sensed the shift, the invisible line drawn around her. Attention in this house was dangerous, especially when it came from someone powerful. Later that night, as Mama Kemi returned to the staff quarters, she pressed her hand to her chest and whispered softly, "You didn't see me, my son, but I saw you." And somewhere deep within her a quiet certainty grew. Fate had begun to move. That night, the mansion lost its light. It happened suddenly, without warning. One moment, the chandeliers glowed warmly above polished floors. The next, everything dropped into darkness. A collective groan rose from the living room as the generator coughed once, twice, and then fell silent. "It's too hot," Amara complained immediately. "How can the generator fail in a house like this?" "Someone didn't maintain it properly," Nadia snapped. "Useless people." Phones lit up one after another, beams slicing through the darkness like restless eyes. The house, stripped of its brightness, felt different now. Smaller, closer, more honest. Darkness has a way of removing masks. Mama Kemi moved carefully down the corridor, holding a small torch she kept in her pocket. She had learned long ago never to rely fully on comfort. As she turned toward the cleaning closet, she heard soft footsteps approaching. "Grandma," a familiar voice whispered. Sarah appeared from the opposite end of the hall holding a small bowl close to her chest. Inside was Gary, soaked in water, simple and plain. "You haven't eaten," Sarah said gently. "Please take some." Mama Kemi tried to refuse. "I'm fine, my daughter." Sarah shook her head and pressed the bowl into her hands. "You're shaking." They sat down together on the cool floor, backs against the wall, sharing the bowl quietly. In the darkness, the space between them disappeared. They were no longer Maid and Charity Girl. They were just two people easing hunger the only way they could together. From somewhere nearby, voices drifted toward them. "Who took my charger?" Ifunanya shouted. "I will flog someone in this house." "Lower your voice," Nadia hissed. "Do you want him to hear you?" Amara laughed softly. "It's probably the Charity Girl. Her hands like free things." Sarah stiffened. "I didn't take anything," she said quietly, though no one could see her face. Footsteps approached. A phone light flashed on suddenly, cutting through the dark and landing directly on them. "What is this?" Nadia's voice demanded. Sarah stood immediately, holding the bowl steady. "We were eating. You sit on the floor and eat with staff now." Nadia scoffed. "Is that how you were raised?" "I was raised to share," Sarah replied calmly. Amara reached for the bowl. "Give me that." Her hand struck the side and the bowl slipped. Gary scattered across the floor, splashing water onto Mama Kemi's wrapper. Laughter began to rise. Then a voice stopped it. "Enough." The beam of light shifted, revealing the young man standing a few steps away. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail: the spilled food, the trembling old woman, the girl kneeling to gather grains from the floor. He stepped forward and removed his handkerchief, offering it to Mama Kemi. "Are you all right, Mama?" "I'm fine, sir," Mama Kemi replied, though her hands trembled slightly. Nadia moved closer, her concern clearly rehearsed. "It was an accident." "Then apologize," he said evenly. To her, Amara asked, incredulous. "To a human being," he replied. Silence fell like a heavy cloth. One by one, forced apologies emerged, thin and reluctant. When the generator finally roared back to life, the lights returned harshly, exposing every face, every expression that had hoped darkness would hide. That night, Mama Kemi lay awake long after the house slept. She replayed the scene in her mind, not the humiliation, but the instinctive way Sarah had shielded her, the steady way her son had spoken when power demanded silence. She opened her small notebook and wrote slowly. "Darkness reveals what light allows people to hide." The next morning, trouble arrived again. It began with shouting. "My bracelet is gone," Ifunanya screamed, running down the stairs with dramatic panic. "Someone stole it." The house froze. The housekeeper gathered everyone in the living room, tension thick in the air. "We will search," she said firmly. "No one leaves." Mama Kemi stood quietly at the back, her eyes on Sarah. Sarah's face was pale, but her posture remained straight. Rooms were searched one by one. When they reached the small shared space where Sarah kept her things, Nadia took charge. She opened boxes, lifted clothes, sighing loudly. Then Ifunanya bent down and lifted Sarah's small bucket. "There it is," she shouted. The bracelet sat neatly on top, dry and shining. Sarah stared at it, shock rippling through her. "I didn't put that there." "After all we've done for you," Amara said sadly. "How could you?" Mama Kemi stepped forward. "That bracelet." "Stay out of it," Nadia snapped. Before the tension could rise further, a familiar calm voice spoke from the doorway. "May I?" The young man walked in holding the bracelet carefully with a handkerchief. He examined it, then looked at the bucket. "No water stains," he said thoughtfully. "But this bucket is wet." Sarah nodded. I washed clothes this morning. If the bracelet had been here long, he continued, it wouldn't be dry. He turned to Ifunanya. Who found it? She did, Zainab replied quickly. And where was she before he asked? Nadia bristled. Are you accusing us? I'm observing, he said. False evidence is common in business. This looks arranged. Mr. Lawson arrived moments later, rubbing his temples as the situation was explained. This ends now, he said finally. Return the bracelet. Leave the girl alone. The sisters retreated, anger burning behind their eyes. That evening, Mama Kemi wrote again. She chooses goodness even when it costs her peace. And though the house pretended nothing had happened, something had shifted. Darkness had spoken. After the bracelet incident, the house fell into a strange quiet. It was not peace. It was calculation. The Lawson daughters became polite in a way that felt rehearsed. Their voices softened, their smiles returned, and they stopped shouting in public spaces. To anyone watching from the outside, it would have looked like growth. To Mama Kemi, it looked like strategy. Cruel people rarely stop. They simply change methods. Sarah sensed it too. The air around her felt tight, as though the walls were listening. Tasks were given without explanation. Messages were passed through servants instead of spoken directly. She was being watched not openly but carefully, as one watches a weak spot waiting to reopen. Mama Kemi stayed close when she could, but she was careful not to interfere too much. This was not her house to command. Her role was still to observe. The young man, David, remained in the guest wing while final discussions with Mr. Lawson continued. He spent long hours in meetings, but whenever he passed through the house, his eyes searched quietly, instinctively. He noticed how Sarah always stepped aside when others approached, how she avoided shared spaces when the daughters were present, how she moved as though trying to make herself smaller. One afternoon he saw Sarah kneeling in the corridor, scrubbing a mark on the floor that most people would have ignored. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hands raw from soap. You don't have to do that alone, he said gently. Sarah looked up startled. It's all right, sir, I was already here. He hesitated. Do you like living here? Sarah paused, the brush still in her hand. It is a house, she said carefully. Houses can be heavy, he replied. Homes should not be. She offered a small smile, but it did not reach her eyes. Some people don't get to choose. He wanted to say more, but footsteps approached. Nadia's voice cut in sharply. Sarah, the laundry downstairs needs sorting now. Sarah stood immediately. Yes? David straightened. I was speaking with her. Nadia's smile tightened. Of course. But work must continue. David studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, work must continue. As Sarah walked away, something settled heavily in his chest. That evening, the daughters gathered in Nadia's room. We are losing control, Amara whispered, pacing. He sees her. He will choose her, Ifunanya said bitterly. Over us, Zainab spoke calmly. Then she must leave. Nadia nodded, not loudly, not violently. She must destroy herself. They leaned closer, voices dropping. She will be accused again, Nadia said, but this time with witnesses, with proof. They planned carefully. A meeting. Important documents. A mistake that could not be ignored. Mama Kemi, mopping nearby, listened without appearing to listen. The next morning, the house prepared for visitors, church elders invited by Mr. Lawson for a Sunday discussion. Respectable men, trusted voices. Nadia ordered Sarah to help serve refreshments in the study. Mama Kemi felt a tightening in her chest. She cleaned the study earlier that day and noticed something strange, a small recorder hidden behind a vase angled toward the table where documents lay open. She said nothing, only shifted it slightly while dusting enough to break its purpose. She whispered a prayer under her breath. Let truth stand. When the elders arrived, the house filled with polite greetings and forced humility. Sarah entered quietly with a tray, her eyes lowered. She placed the drinks carefully on a side table. As she turned to leave, Amara's voice stopped her. "Sarah," she said sweetly, "you can read, can't you?" "Yes," Sarah replied. "What's written there?" Nadia asked, pointing vaguely toward the table. Sarah did not look. "Sir's papers," Nadia pressed. "Which papers? I don't know," Sarah said calmly. "I didn't read them." Ifunanya laughed. "Liar." Sarah said nothing. She finished her task and left the room. Later, when the elders had gone, Nadia gathered the family. "Daddy," she said, holding up the recorder, "listen." They pressed play. The room filled with sound footsteps, whispers Nadia's own voice urging Amara to provoke Sarah. Bianca's laughter. Instructions spoken too clearly. There was no evidence of Sarah reading anything, only evidence of a trap. Mr. Lawson's face darkened. "What is this?" "We were protecting the house," Nadia said quickly. David stepped forward from the doorway. "This is the second time I've seen dishonesty dressed as protection." Silence fell. Mr. Lawson straightened. "From today, your allowances are cut. All of you." "What?" Ifunanya cried. "You will learn respect without money," he said sharply. Sarah stood outside the room, hands clasped tightly. Justice had spoken, but it did not feel like victory. That night, Sarah packed her few belongings quietly. A wrapper, 3 dresses, a small Bible, a photograph of a sunrise she barely remembered. Mama Kimmy found her at the back door. "Where are you going?" she asked softly. "I need air," Sarah replied. "If I stay, something worse will happen." Before Mama Kemi could answer, David appeared. "You're leaving," he said gently. Sarah nodded. "Come with me," he said, "to somewhere safe." She hesitated, then nodded again. As Sarah walked through the side gate, the Lawson daughters watched from the window above. "This isn't over," Nadia whispered. Mama Kemi stood alone in the garden, tears finally escaping her eyes. The masks were falling, and the final truth was drawing near. The afternoon sun poured mercilessly into the Lawson mansion, bright and unforgiving, as if determined to expose what the walls had hidden for too long. Shadows shrank, and with them, patience thinned. Mama Kemi was on her knees in the main hallway, pushing an old mop across the marble floor. The surface gleamed, reflecting chandeliers and framed smiles from the walls, but the work demanded more than shine. Sweat rolled down her temples and soaked the scarf tied firmly around her head. Her hands trembled not from weakness alone, but from exhaustion, layered on humiliation. From the staircase above, the Lawson daughters watched. Nadia leaned against the railing, arms crossed, her mouth curled into a smile that held no warmth. Amara stood beside her phone, already raised, pretending to check messages while the camera quietly recorded. Zainab whispered something sharp and private. Ifunanya laughed openly, delighted by the scene unfolding below. Old woman Nadia called out, her voice echoing down the hallway. "You missed a spot. Are your eyes failing too?" Mama Kemi bowed her head. "I'll clean it, Ma." Amara stepped forward and tossed her half-finished juice cup onto the floor. The liquid splashed across the tiles, spreading like a fresh insult. "Clean that too," she said lightly. Mama Kemi did not respond. She lowered herself further, dipping the mop back into the bucket. Her knees pressed painfully against the hard floor. Each movement felt heavier than the last. Ifunanya laughed and zoomed her phone closer. "Look at her back," she mocked, like a tree about to snap. The laughter grew louder, crueler. Then it happened. As Mama Kimi dragged the mop across the wet tiles, her foot slipped. The bucket tipped. Water spilled. She lost her balance and fell hard onto her side, her elbow striking the floor with a dull, sickening sound. Her head knocked against the bucket, sending a sharp wave of pain through her body. She lay still for a moment, stunned. The laughter exploded. Nadia clapped her hands. "Did you see that?" Amara bent over, holding her stomach. "This is too funny." Ifunanya squealed with delight, her phone capturing every second. "This will go viral." Mama Kemi's vision blurred. Pain pulsed through her elbow and shoulder. In that moment, stripped of dignity and strength, she looked exactly as they wanted her to look: small, broken, disposable. Then, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. "Grandma?" Sarah appeared, carrying folded laundry. The moment she saw Mama Kemi on the floor, she dropped everything and ran forward, kneeling in the spilled water without hesitation. "Are you hurt?" Sarah cried, her voice shaking as she gently lifted Mama Kemi's head. She examined her elbow, already swelling, and tore a strip from her wrapper to press against it. "Don't move," Sarah whispered. "Breathe. You'll be all right." Nadia scoffed. "Why are you wasting time on her? She's just staff." Sarah turned sharply, anger blazing in her eyes for the first time. "She is a human being," she shouted. "How can you laugh when someone is hurt?" The hallway fell silent. The daughters stared at her, stunned. Sarah had never raised her voice before, never challenged them openly. Zainab grabbed Ifunanya's arm. "Leave it," she hissed. "Let her play hero." They retreated, their laughter replaced by irritation. Sarah helped Mama Kemi sit up against the wall, fanning her gently. "You're safe now," she murmured. "Don't cry." But tears filled Mama Kemi's eyes, not just from pain, but from something far deeper. In that house, no one had defended her. No one had lifted her when she fell. No one except Sarah. With trembling fingers, Mama Kemi reached up and touched Sarah's cheek. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You have a heart of gold." Sarah smiled weakly through her own tears. "I only did what was right." But Mama Kemi knew the truth. Right was expensive in that house, and Sarah had paid for it again and again. As the afternoon wore on, Mama Kemi was helped back to the staff quarters to rest. Her body ached, but her spirit was clear. The test she had set out to conduct was complete. She had seen cruelty dressed in silk, and she had seen kindness clothed in rags. Later that evening, Mama Kemi asked permission to buy cleaning supplies from the nearby market. The request was granted without interest. She waited for Sarah by the side gate. "Come with me," Mama Kemi said gently. "You need air, too." They walked together toward the small market behind the estate, where life unfolded honestly without polished floors or pretending smiles. Vendors called out their prices. Children laughed and chased one another between stalls. Drummers tested rhythms on stretched goatskin beneath a neem tree. Sarah moved through the market quietly, greeting sellers politely. She bought soap and salt, then stopped to purchase a small loaf of bread. As they turned to leave, a thin boy selling sachets of water tugged at her sleeve. She hesitated only a moment before breaking the bread in half and handing it to him. "Aren't you hungry?" Mama Kemi asked. "I am," Sarah replied softly, "but he looks hungrier." They sat on a low bench to rest. Mama Kemi studied Sarah's face in the open light. There was strength there, quiet, unyielding. "Where is your family?" Mama Kemi asked gently. Sarah's eyes lowered. "I don't know," she said. "I remember a woman's laugh, a red scarf, smoke from a fire." Then nothing. She spoke of growing up in shelters, of being chosen during a charity visit because she smiled well for cameras, of being fed and clothed but never truly claimed. "Do you hate them?" Mama Kemi asked. Sarah shook her head. "No, a bad bed is still better than the cold floor." Those words cut deep. When they returned to the mansion, Mama Kemi's decision was no longer forming. It was sealed. She had come to find a daughter-in-law, and she had found her. The Lawson mansion buzzed again the next morning, but the energy had changed. It was no longer the sharp excitement of competition or the careless laughter of cruelty. It was tension thin, stretched, waiting to snap. Mama Kemi woke before dawn, her elbow still sore from the fall, her body aching in places pride had once protected. She wrapped her scarf carefully and stepped outside, breathing in the cool morning air. In her chest, a decision rested, fully formed, heavy, but certain. She was no longer observing. She was choosing. Inside the house, Sarah moved silently as she always did, but something in her had shifted too. The humiliation of the previous day, the laughter that followed Mama Kemi's fall, and the sudden silence afterward had taken something from her. Not her kindness, but her sense of safety. She felt it in the way her heart raced when footsteps approached from behind, in the way she avoided the hallway where Mama Kemi had fallen, in the way she flinched when someone spoke her name sharply. David noticed. He had returned early that morning to retrieve a file he had forgotten. It was a small excuse, one he did not bother justifying to himself. He wanted to see Sarah again. He wanted to know if she was all right. He found her in the kitchen, washing cups at the sink. Her sleeves rolled up, her hands red from soap and water. "Good morning," he said gently. Sarah, startled, then turned quickly. "Good morning, sir." He hesitated, then smiled. "I don't think I ever told you my name." "I'm David." She nodded. "I know." He leaned against the counter, watching her rinse a cup. "Do you like it here?" Sarah paused, considering the question carefully. "It is a house," she said. "And a home," he asked. She shook her head slightly. "Homes feel safe." The word lingered between them. "If you ever needed help," David said quietly, "would you ask Sarah?" Dried her hands on a cloth. "I don't ask for what I can't repay. Sometimes repayment isn't money," he replied. "Sometimes it's a prayer." She looked at him, then really looked at him as if measuring the weight of his words. "Then I will pray for you," she said softly. From the doorway, Amara watched her jaw tightening. She turned sharply and walked away, phone already in her hand. Within an hour, the sisters were gathered in Nadia's room. "This has gone too far," Nadia said, pacing. "He is choosing her." "He defends her," Amara added, "in front of us." Zainab sat calmly on the bed. "Then she must be removed." "Completely." Ifunanya frowned. "Daddy already warned us." Nadia stopped pacing. "Daddy protects the house's image, not her." They leaned closer, voices dropping. "We'll make it look like betrayal," Nadia said. "So she leaves on her own." The plan was careful, cruel, and quiet. That afternoon, Mr. Lawson prepared to host church elders in the study, respected men whose words carried weight. Nadia arranged for important partnership documents to be placed openly on the table. Zainab hid a small recorder behind a flower vase angled to catch every sound. Amara instructed the housekeeper to send Sarah in with drinks when the elders arrived. Mama Kemi cleaned the study earlier that day. As she dusted the shelves, her eyes caught the faint outline of the recorder. She did not pause. She did not react. She simply shifted the vase slightly, just enough to block the microphone's reach, then continued wiping the table. She whispered a prayer so quiet it barely existed. Let truth stand. When the elders arrived, the air smelled of cologne, old paper, and respectability. Sarah entered with a tray of malt drinks and small chops. Her eyes lowered, her posture careful. She placed the tray on a side table and turned to leave. Sarah Nadia's voice stopped her. "Yes, Ma. You can read, can't you?" "Yes." "What's on the table?" Amara asked sweetly. Sarah did not look. "Sir's papers." "Which papers?" Nadia pressed. "I don't know," Sarah replied. "I didn't read them." Ifunanya laughed. "See how she lies." Sarah said nothing more. She finished her task and left the room. Later, when the elders had gone and only family remained, Nadia produced the recorder. "Daddy," she said, "you should hear this." They pressed play. The device crackled. footsteps echoed. Voices whispered Nadia's own voice, instructing Amara Zainab's low laughter the sound of someone urging Sarah to comment. There was no sound of Sarah reading, no admission, no crime, only a trap laid bare. Mr. Lawson's face darkened. "What is this nonsense we were protecting the house?" Nadia said quickly. David stepped forward from the doorway. "This is the second time I've seen dishonesty dressed as protection." Silence filled the room. Mr. Lawson straightened. "From today, all your allowances are cut. You will learn respect without money." The daughters erupted, shouting, protesting, pleading. "Enough," he said sharply. "I have failed you if this is who you've become." Outside the study, Sarah pressed her hands together, trying to steady their shaking. Justice had spoken, but it did not feel like safety. That night she packed quietly. Her belongings were few: 3 dresses, a wrapper, a small Bible, and a faded photograph of a sunrise over water. She tied them carefully into a cloth and stood by the back door staring at the garden she had never been allowed to enjoy. Mama Kemi found her there. "Where are you going?" "My daughter, I need to leave," Sarah said softly. "If I stay, something worse will happen." "Where will you go?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't know, but a road will appear." As if summoned by the words, David walked around the corner. "You're leaving," he said gently. "Yes. Come with me," he said. "I'll take you somewhere safe. We'll speak with my mother." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Mama Kemi watched them walk toward the gate together, her heart pounding with fear and relief. As Sarah disappeared beyond the walls, Mama Kemi finally allowed herself to cry. The time for masks was ending. The time for truth had arrived. The car moved quietly through the streets away from the Lawson mansion and its polished lies. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, her small bundle resting on her lap, fingers gripping the fabric tightly as if letting go would make everything disappear. She did not cry. She felt emptied, like a cup poured out too many times without being refilled. David drove in silence, giving her the space she needed. He did not rush her with questions or promises. He understood that sometimes the kindest thing was simply not to demand anything. They arrived at a compound set back from the road, framed by flowering shrubs and a tall blue gate. It was not grand in the way the Lawson mansion was. There were no towering walls, no guards pacing with visible authority. Yet the place breathed peace. The gate opened smoothly. "Welcome, sir," the security man said, his voice respectful in a way that came from familiarity, not fear. "Thank you," David replied. "Please tell Mommy I'm here." The word struck Sarah unexpectedly. Mommy. She turned slightly, her heart skipping. Before she could ask anything, the front door opened. An old woman stepped onto the veranda. Her wrapper was neatly tied. Her scarf sat firmly on her head. Her back was straight, strong, dignified. Her eyes were sharp but kind, holding a calm authority that filled the space without effort. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was her, the old maid from the Lawson house. Grandma Sarah whispered disbelief, flooding her voice. The woman smiled gently and walked closer. David stepped out of the car and took her hands. "Mommy," he said simply. "Meet Sarah." The world seemed to stop. Sarah's knees weakened, and she reached for the railing to steady herself. Her mind raced, struggling to connect the fragments: mop bucket, quiet prayers, shared meals with the woman standing before her, now whole and powerful. The old woman untied her scarf slowly and let it fall. "My name is Kemi Adeyemi," she said softly. "David's mother." Silence wrapped around them. Sarah's lips parted, but no sound came out. Tears filled her eyes, not from betrayal alone, but from the overwhelming weight of understanding. You were there," she finally managed. "You saw everything." "Yes," Mama Kemi replied. "I needed to." David looked between them, his voice low and earnest. I didn't know, I swear, Sarah. I had no idea my mother was in that house. Sarah nodded slowly. She believed him. The shock was too great for anger to settle yet. Mama Kemi stepped closer and took Sarah's hands in hers. I went there looking for a daughter-in-law, she said gently. Someone who would love my son, not his name. Someone who would respect people even when no one was watching. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks. So, this was all a test. Mama Kemi shook her head. Not for you, for them. Sarah let out a broken laugh mixed with sobs. God has a strange sense of humor. Mama Kemi smiled sadly. He does. They sat together under the shade of a flowering tree. Mama Kemi spoke of her journey, of why she chose to become invisible, of the things she witnessed, the laughter, the cruelty, the pride that rotted beneath polished manners. Character, she said quietly, shows itself when power is not watching. David listened, his jaw tight, his heart heavy with what his mother had endured in silence. When Mama Kemi finished, she turned to Sarah. You fed me when you thought I was nothing. You defended me when it cost you safety. I chose you before my son told me he loved you. David inhaled sharply and turned to Sarah. I fell in love with you the day you picked up that towel and apologized for a mistake that wasn't yours. Sarah pressed her palms to her cheeks, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay, David whispered. She nodded, tears streaming freely now. I'll stay. But peace was short-lived. Back at the Lawson mansion, the daughters watched the side gate long after Sarah disappeared. This isn't over, Nadia hissed, pacing the living room. She thinks she's won. She's nobody, Amara snapped, a street girl. Zainab's eyes were dark. Then we remind the town of that. They moved quietly, spreading poison through whispers. At the market, among hairdressers, among women selling tomatoes and peppers, the story changed shape. That girl, someone whispered. No family. They say she stole once, another added. Cursed, a third murmured. How else would she trap a rich man? By the next morning, the town buzzed. Sarah heard it when she went out briefly to buy vegetables with Mama Kemi's driver. Conversations stopped when she passed. Eyes followed her. Laughter came late and sharp. Her hands shook as she paid the vendor. Back at the compound, Mama Kemi was waiting. You heard them, she said gently. Sarah nodded, tears spilling over. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong in your world. Mama Kemi lifted her chin firmly. A tree does not ask permission from goats before it grows. They talk because they are afraid. David arrived soon after, his expression dark when he heard what had happened. They insult you because they fear losing me, he said. But I'm not a prize to be won. I choose. He went straight to the Lawson mansion. The daughters were lounging in the living room when he arrived, their laughter fading as they saw his face. You think gossip will weaken me, David said coldly. You think I don't know where it started, Nadia smirked. A rich man's wife must carry honor. She has none. David stepped closer. Honor is not in jewelry or gowns. It is in the heart. That is why you were never chosen. Mr. Lawson entered just in time to hear the exchange. Shame washed over his face. Enough, he said sharply. You have disgraced this family. That night, Mama Kemi called Sarah into her prayer room. A small lamp flickered softly. She placed her hands on Sarah's head. You are my daughter now, she whispered. Not because of my son, but because of who you are. Sarah wept openly. Outside, David stood quietly wiping his eyes. Truth had spoken. And though the storm was not yet over, the foundation was set. The rumors did not fade. They multiplied. In the days that followed David's confrontation with the Lawson daughters, the town seemed to split into two quiet camps. Some people watched Sarah with curiosity and awe, whispering about destiny and grace. Others clung stubbornly to the poison they had been fed, repeating it until it sounded like truth. Sarah felt the weight of it everywhere. At the market, conversations paused when she approached. At the tailor's shop, measuring tape, slowed eyes lingered. Even among women who smiled politely, there was distance now, a thin wall built from envy and fear. At night, Sarah lay awake in the guest room of Mama Kemi's home, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of the compound. She pressed her hand against her chest and tried to quiet the doubt that crept in like a thief. What if they are right? What if I really don't belong here? Mama Kemi noticed the change immediately. She saw how Sarah's laughter faded, how her shoulders curved inward again, how she hesitated before speaking as if weighing every word for danger. One evening, Mama Kemi sat beside her on the veranda. "Tell me," she said softly, "what is heavier right now? The lies they speak or the truth you know?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I know who I am," she whispered, "but sometimes knowing isn't loud enough." Mama Kemi nodded slowly. "Then we will speak truth loudly." But the Lawson daughters had one more move left. They knew the power of public shame. And they knew something else, too. In the town, religious words could still bend crowds more than money. Nadia met with them late at night, her voice low and urgent. "The wedding is coming," she said. "If she stands beside him, everything is over." Amara clenched her fists. People are already talking. Zainab's eyes narrowed. "Then we make someone respected say it." They chose a pastor known more for his appetite for gifts than his devotion. In a quiet room, Nadia placed a thick envelope on the table. "Say you had a vision," she instructed. "Say this girl carries a curse. Say her marriage will bring ruin." The pastor hesitated only a moment before sliding the envelope into his pocket. "If it is for the good of the family," he said. That night, one of the house staff overheard everything. A woman who had watched Sarah clean quietly, who had seen Mama Kemi fall and be lifted by kindness. She did not sleep. She carried the truth with her until morning, then found Mama Kemi. "They are planning something," she whispered. "In church." Mama Kemi closed her eyes briefly. "So, this is their last weapon," she said. The wedding day arrived bright and loud. Drums echoed through the town. Women tied colorful headscarves. Men wore rich traditional outfits. The hall was filled with flowers, palm fronds, and the warm scent of food meant for celebration. Sarah stood behind a curtain dressed simply but beautifully. Coral beads rested against her neck. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her wrapper. "You look radiant, Mama." Kemi said, her voice thick with emotion. Sarah tried to smile. "Mama, what if they stand up and say something?" Mama Kemi took her hands. "Then truth will stand too." The ceremony began. Songs rose. The crowd murmured in admiration as Sarah stepped forward. For a moment, the whispers died, replaced by awe at her quiet dignity. Then the pastor cleared his throat. "My people," he said, raising a hand. "Before we proceed, I must speak what the Lord revealed to me." A ripple passed through the crowd. "This girl," he continued, pointing at Sarah, "carries darkness. If this union happens, sorrow will enter this home." Gasps filled the hall. Heads turned. Sarah felt her legs weaken. From the corner, Nadia and Amara exchanged triumphant glances. Then a voice rang out. "That is a lie." The house staff woman stepped forward, shaking but determined. "They paid him." "I heard them." Murmurs exploded. Others joined her, the cook, the gardener, 2 more workers. "It's true," they said. "We heard the plan." The pastor's face drained of color. In his panic, the envelope slipped from his pocket and burst open. Money scattered across the floor. Silence fell. Mr. Lawson stood slowly, his face burning with shame. "Out," he thundered at the pastor. "Get out of here." He turned to his daughters. "You have disgraced this family." Boos rose from the crowd. The Lawson daughters shrank back, their pride collapsing in front of everyone. David stepped forward and took Sarah's hand firmly. "No lie can stand against truth," he said. Cheers erupted. Mama Kimmy walked to the center, her voice trembling but strong. "When I wore rags, you mocked me. When I carried a mop, you laughed. But wealth is not clothes. It is character." She turned to Sarah. "This is my daughter." The drums thundered again. The ceremony resumed not with doubt, but with joy. The last lie had fallen. The hall was still buzzing when the ceremony paused, the echoes of truth hanging in the air like dust after a storm. People whispered, some in disbelief, others in relief. A few wiped tears from their eyes, not because of the drama, but because something rare had just happened and public truth had survived shame. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, her fingers still wrapped tightly around David's hand. Her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure others could hear it. Just minutes earlier she had felt as though the ground might swallow her whole. Now she stood in the center of the room, exposed, but no longer alone. David leaned closer. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, though tears continued to slide down her cheeks. "I am," she said. I didn't think truth would come so fast." Mama Kemi stepped forward and embraced her gently, the way a mother shields a child from lingering noise. "Truth is patient," she said, "but when it speaks fully." Across the hall, the Lawson daughters sat stiffly at the back, their glamorous outfits suddenly looking like costumes worn for the wrong play. Nadia's jaw was clenched so tightly it trembled. Amara stared at the floor, her phone forgotten in her hand. Zainab's eyes darted around the room, calculating exits that no longer existed. Ifunanya looked small for the first time, confusion clouding her face as the weight of consequences settled in. Mr. Lawson remained standing, his shoulders heavy with shame. He had built a public image on respect and generosity, yet here he was watching that image crack because of his own household. He cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. "I owe this gathering an apology," he said, his voice strained. "I failed to see what was happening under my roof. I failed to teach my children that character matters more than status." Some nodded, others remained silent. Apologies, after all, do not erase wounds. Mama Kemi turned to him calmly. "Acknowledging failure is the first step," she said. "Repairing it is the next." Mr. Lawson lowered his head. The ceremony resumed slowly, carefully, as if everyone needed time to breathe again. The songs felt deeper, now less decorative and more sincere. When vows were spoken, they carried weight. When blessings were given, they felt earned. Sarah's hands no longer trembled. As the final prayer ended, the hall erupted into celebration. Drums roared. Women ululated. Men clapped rhythmically. Children ran between chairs, laughing freely, untouched by the heaviness that adults carried. For a moment, it seemed like the story had reached its end, but some endings still needed to unfold. Later that evening, after the guests had eaten and begun to leave, Mama Kemi asked David and Sarah to walk with her outside. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of flowers and distant cooking fires. "This is not only about marriage," Mama Kemi said as they walked. "It is about what happens next." Sarah listened closely. "You will enter rooms where your past will be questioned," Mama Kemi continued. "You will meet people who smile politely, but count your worth by what you bring, not who you are." Sarah swallowed. "I know." Mama Kemi stopped and turned to her. "When that happens, remember this night. Remember that truth defended you when you had nothing to defend yourself with." David nodded. "And you won't face it alone." Across town, the Lawson mansion was silent in a way it had never been before. The daughters returned home without ceremony, without laughter, without the protective noise of pride. The gates closed behind them, heavy and final. Inside, the house felt emptier, stripped of performance. Nadia broke the silence first. "This is not fair," she snapped, pacing the living room. "That girl humiliated us." Amara sank into a chair. "No," she said quietly, "we humiliated ourselves." Zainab sat near the window staring out into the dark. "We underestimated kindness," she said slowly. "We thought it was weakness." Ifunanya hugged her knees. "Are we bad people?" she asked, her voice small. No one answered immediately. Mr. Lawson entered the room, then his expression firm. "From tomorrow," he said, "your allowances remain cut. You will learn to live by effort, not entitlement." Nadia scoffed. "You're punishing us for one mistake." "For many," he replied calmly, "and for the one you still refuse to see." Upstairs, doors closed one by one. That night, for the first time, the Lawson daughters lay awake not plotting, not laughing, but thinking. Pride had protected them for years. Now it had abandoned them. Back at Mama Kemi's compound, Sarah sat alone in her room, her wedding attire folded neatly on the bed. She picked up her old Bible and held it against her chest, breathing deeply. There was a knock at the door. Mama Kemi entered quietly and sat beside her. "You did well today," she said. Sarah shook her head. "I was terrified." Mama Kemi smiled. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing when fear demands you kneel." Sarah looked at her eyes shining. "Why did you really choose me?" Mama Kemi did not answer immediately. She reached for Sarah's hands and held them firmly. "Because when power laughed at me, you knelt to help," she said. "Because when food was scarce, you shared. Because when lies rose, you stayed quiet instead of becoming cruel." She paused. "Because you did not change when the world treated you badly." Tears spilled freely now. David stood in the doorway watching the two women, his heart full and humbled. He realized then that wealth had given him opportunities, but these two women had taught him something far more valuable: how to choose right when choosing was costly. As the night deepened, Mama Kemi rose. "Rest now," she said. "Tomorrow begins a new chapter." When she left, Sarah lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, not with fear this time, but with quiet wonder. She had entered the Lawson mansion as a forgotten girl. She would leave this season as a chosen woman. And somewhere in the stillness a truth echoed clearly: at last, kindness, when tested, does not disappear. It rises. The morning after the wedding did not feel like celebration. It felt like awakening. Sunlight crept gently across the compound, touching the flowers, the stone path, the quiet veranda where Mama Kemi sat alone with a cup of tea. The drums were gone. The guests had returned to their lives. What remained was truth unadorned, demanding to be lived, not applauded. Inside the house, Sarah stood by the window of her new room, watching birds gather on the fence. She was no longer the charity girl, no longer the silent shadow in someone else's home. She was now a wife, a daughter-in-law, a woman whose name people would speak with interest, yet her chest felt heavy. David noticed it immediately. "You're quiet," he said, gently stepping beside her. Sarah smiled faintly. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About who I was, and who people expect me to be now." David nodded. "That space can be frightening." She turned to him. "What if I disappoint them? Your world is so different from mine." He reached for her hands. "My world is not buildings or accounts," he said. "It's values, and those are the same everywhere." Still, Sarah's doubt lingered. Later that day, Mama Kemi called Sarah to sit with her under the old mango tree at the edge of the compound. It was a place Mama Kemi often chose for difficult conversations, where roots showed above the soil, reminding anyone who sat there that growth required grounding. "You are afraid," Mama Kemi said calmly. Sarah nodded. "I don't want to become someone I don't recognize." Mama Kemi smiled knowingly. "Power does not change who you are. It reveals what was already inside. She leaned closer. But you must understand something important. People will test you again. Not with insults this time, but with expectations. Sarah listened intently. They will expect you to forget where you came from, Mama Kemi continued. They will expect you to prove you belong by acting superior. That test is harder than poverty. Sarah swallowed. How do I pass it? Mama Kemi placed a hand over her heart. By remembering this place, this feeling, by choosing humility when pride feels easier. At that moment, a visitor arrived unannounced. The security man approached cautiously. Madam, someone is asking to see you. Who? Mama Kemi asked. Nadia Lawson. Sarah's heart skipped. David appeared moments later. She wants to speak with you, he said. I can send her away. Mama Kemi considered for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No, let her come. Nadia entered the compound slowly without the confidence she once wore like armor. Her dress was simple now, her makeup light, her eyes restless. She stopped a few steps away and bowed her head slightly. Thank you for seeing me. Mama Kemi gestured for her to sit. Speak. Nadia's hands trembled as she folded them together. I didn't come to defend myself, she said quickly. I came because everything fell apart. She spoke of the house, how silence now filled rooms, once loud with arrogance. How money no longer shielded her from consequences. How people who once flattered her avoided her gaze. I don't know who I am without power, Nadia admitted, tears slipping free. And I don't know how you endured what we did to you. Mama Kemi listened without interruption. When Nadia finished, she turned to Sarah. Do you wish to say anything? Sarah hesitated. Old wounds stirred. Then she spoke. I don't hate you, she said softly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to become bitter. Nadia nodded ashamed. I understand. Mama Kemi finally spoke. What you lost was not stolen from you. It was removed so you could see yourself clearly. She stood. Leave now, go and build something real. That is the only apology that matters. Nadia rose, bowed deeply, and left without another word. When she was gone, Sarah exhaled shakily. You did well, Mama Kemi said. You spoke without cruelty. That afternoon, Sarah insisted on visiting the market alone. I need to see it again, she told David. I need to remember. Dressed simply without jewelry or announcement, she walked through the familiar streets. Some people stared, some whispered. Others smiled warmly. The woman who once sold her tomatoes pressed an extra handful into her bag. For luck, she said. A child selling water waved shyly. Sarah bought 2 sachets and gave one back. She returned to the compound lighter than she had left. That evening, David found her sitting on the steps. I know now, she said. Know what? That I don't have to choose between who I was and who I am becoming. I can carry both. David smiled. That's the strongest place to stand. As night fell, Mama Kemi stood at the doorway watching them. Her mission had begun as a test. It had ended as a lesson not just for her son, not just for Sarah, but for everyone who had watched power crumble and character rise. Still, one final chapter remained. Because the greatest lessons are not proven in celebration, but in what we choose to build after the applause ends. The days after the wedding settled into something quieter than celebration, something deeper. The town returned to its routines, but not unchanged. Stories lingered in conversations and pauses in the way people looked twice before speaking too quickly about the poor or the weak. Sarah felt those changes even when no one spoke them aloud. She woke early, as she always had, and walked through the compound while the air was still cool. She helped in the kitchen, not because she had to, but because her hands remembered work as a language of dignity. She greeted the guards by name. She asked the gardeners about their families. She laughed easily but never loudly. She listened more than she spoke. Some people were surprised. They had expected transformation silk replacing simplicity, distance replacing warmth. What they saw instead unsettled them. Power had entered Sarah's life, yet it had not rearranged her posture or sharpened her voice. It had not erased her past. It had illuminated it. Mama Kemi watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. One afternoon she called Sarah to sit beside her in the courtyard. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting gentle patterns on the ground. "There is something you must understand now," Mama Kemi said. "Being chosen is not the end of your test." Sarah nodded. "I feel that." "People will try to provoke you," Mama Kemi continued. "They will expect revenge. They will wait for you to become what they once accused you of being." Sarah's eyes lifted. "And if I don't," Mama Kemi smiled, "then you will remain free." David joined them, carrying a stack of documents. He placed them on the table and sat down. "The Foundation Board approved the community program," he said. "We can start next month." Sarah leaned forward, curious. "What kind of program?" "Skills training," David explained. "For women without support. Literacy, small business funding, childcare assistance." Mama Kemi nodded approvingly. Let the doors open wide. Word spread quickly. Women came from nearby communities, hesitant at first, unsure if this was another promise dressed as charity. Sarah met them herself, sitting on plastic chairs listening to their stories without interrupting. She remembered hunger. She remembered shame. She remembered being chosen for pictures, then forgotten. She refused to repeat that cycle. Meanwhile, the Lawson mansion stood quieter than ever. The daughters moved through their days, slowly, now stripped of entitlement. Nadia took a job at a small firm recommended by her father, not glamorous, but honest. Amara stopped posting for a while. Without an audience, she had to sit with herself. Zainab returned to school, choosing a field where discipline mattered more than dominance. Ifunanya struggled most. Youth had shielded her cruelty once. Now it offered no excuses. One evening, Mr. Lawson visited Mama Kemi. He arrived without ceremony, dressed plainly, his shoulders heavy with humility. "I came to thank you," he said quietly, "and to apologize." Mama Kemi gestured for him to sit. "Speak." "I failed my daughters," he admitted. "I taught them success without compassion, and it nearly destroyed them." Mama Kemi met his eyes. "Failure becomes final only when it refuses correction." He nodded. "I am trying." Sarah listened from a distance, not with pride but with understanding. Some lessons arrived late. What mattered was whether they arrived at all. Weeks later, the town gathered again, this time not for a wedding, but for the opening of a modest center near the market. The sign read, simply "Hands that lift, no names, no titles." Sarah stood quietly at the back as Mama Kemi addressed the crowd. "This place is not a gift," Mama Kemi said. "It is a reminder that dignity grows when we choose to see one another." Sarah stepped forward only when called. She looked out at the faces, women with tired eyes, children clutching their skirts, men watching cautiously. "I was once unseen," she said softly. "Not because I lacked value, but because others were too busy protecting their pride to notice." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "If you are here," Sarah continued, "it means you have something worth building. We are not here to save you. We are here to stand with you." Applause rose not loud but steady. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Sarah and David sat together beneath the same mango tree where doubts had once taken root. "You carry this well," David said. Sarah smiled. "I carry it because I remember how heavy it once felt." Mama Kemi approached them. Her steps measured, her eyes shining. "I watched you today," she said to Sarah. "You did not perform goodness. You lived it." Sarah lowered her head. I learned from you. Mama Kemi shook her head gently. No, you reminded me. As night settled, the town quieted. In homes, both large and small people spoke of the story they had witnessed not as gossip but as lesson. That wealth does not crown character, that cruelty collapses under its own weight, that kindness when tested becomes power, and Sarah once called nothing stood rooted in herself, unchanged by applause, unshaken by envy, guided by a truth she had carried long before anyone noticed her. She had not stolen a crown. She had revealed it. This story reminds us that life does not test us when we are strong, admired, or protected. It tests us when we are invisible, when no one is watching, and when kindness costs us something real. Sarah did not rise because she was chosen by wealth. She was chosen because she never allowed pain to turn her heart cold. While others used power to humiliate, she used humility to protect. While lies were louder, she stayed quiet and truthful. And when cruelty tried to define her, she refused to become what hurt her. The lesson is simple, yet difficult to live by. Character is not proven in comfort, but in pressure. True wealth is not measured by houses' titles or public praise, but by how we treat those who can give us nothing in return. In a world that rewards pride and performance, choosing kindness is a radical act. It may look like weakness at first, but in the end it becomes unshakable strength. If this story touched your heart, ask yourself one question today. Who are you when no one is applauding you? Are you still kind when it costs you something? Are you still honest when lying would be easier? We would love to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments what this story taught you and where you are watching from. And if you believe stories like this can heal, challenge, and inspire, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Stay with us, because more stories of justice, hope, and transformation are coming.